So hi everyone, my name is David. I'm co-founder of Passionate People, and I'm also working as a JavaScript developer at Albert Heijn. So for the non-Dutchies, Albert Heijn is the biggest online and offline grocery store in the Netherlands. And I want to tell you a little bit of a case study, how we implemented Microfrontends and why we did it for Albert Heijn. First, I want to tell you a little bit about the old situation. So it used to be really simple. The old situation was building Backbone. How many people work with Backbone here? Oh, a lot. I feel your pain. So we used to have a Java monolith backend and a Backbone application on the front end. But it was already API first. That was a good thing. But the bad thing was that actually the Java monolith, it said how the page should be rendered, for example. So it should said, okay, the header needs to be here, blah, 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 blah. So it made up a lot of logic for the front end, and that made it really difficult. So we were facing some challenges. So first of all, I remember my first day at Albert Heijn, I opened the solution, and I felt like that was me, because it was so much code that I had to figure out. So it was really hard to start working. And we were facing multiple issues, because if you know Backbone, then everything is very tightly coupled because you work with inheritance. Ownership is another thing. So if everyone is working on the same solution, then no one kind of feels responsible in a sense for specific features, because anyone was working on a specific feature. So when there's a bug, then people say like, no, that wasn't me. That was probably the other developer. We had a 2-weekly release cycle. So the business was requesting features every day, but we could only deploy once every 2 weeks if it was a good week. Because sometimes the build didn't work, and then we had to wait another 2 weeks to release the application. So it took a long time to deploy features. Testing was another thing, because it was a massive application. We also had to run end-to-end tests, and every change could have an impact on the entire website. So you had to run all the tests all the time. And it took literally like 4 or 5 hours to run all the end-to-end tests. And I remember when it failed, you're like, no. I found a lot of Albert Heijn memes, by the way, so I'm going to put them in the slide. And we knew that we had big plans for the future. When I started working there, we were with 10 front-end developers, about 10 front-end developers, and currently we are already with 35 front-end developers. So there's a lot of people working on the website, and also the way that Albert Heijn works is it's a big company, so they won't say, like, okay, we're going to add 1 or 2 developers. No, we're going to place 4 more teams. So we found out that the current application was not future-proof. And then the first thing you hear is that deal with it when you go to the business. Because, of course, they think we already have an existing website, and it's not that old, and it's cheaper. So then we had to think, okay, what business value can we actually add? Because if we can prove to the business that it's actually worth to rewrite some part of the application, then they will be more likely to invest in it. So first of all was time to market. That's one thing we wanted to improve. We wanted to release daily and not 1-2 weeks, if we're lucky. We wanted to create more focus, because everyone was working on the same solution, so you could just have a random feature that you had to pick up, and then, sometimes you didn't know anything about it, and then you had a lack of focus because you first had to learn how it worked, and then you could be working on the products domain, then on the account domain, for example. So there wasn't a clear focus. And another thing was search engine optimization, which is very important for Albert Heijn, because people look up recipes, for example. And because we were dealing with Backbone, well, you could use Puppeteer, for example, to pre-render some stuff. But preferably, you want to do that out of the box. And performance was another thing. Sometimes it really felt like shopping offline, standing in a queue. And we were also thinking, okay, what developers' experience can we actually add? So first of all, we wanted to use modern technologies. We wanted to make it more attractive to actually work on the project. We wanted to have more ownership. That also comes back to the focus part, is that you don't want to be working on the accounts domain and product domain and then all those different domains, and that could that could impact one another if you implement the change. So we said, okay, we want to have more ownership, that you feel responsible for your specific part of the application within your team. And we also wanted to create more freedom, because the stack, it was defined, okay, we use Backbone, we use this nodejs version, we use whatever. and you have to use this version because it's a global install within the entire application. We also had some constraints. So we had to rebuild the website step by step because it's a huge website, so you can imagine that you can't just rebuild the whole website. I mean, we started 2 years ago and we're not even finished rebuilding the website, so you have to maintain the old website, but then also start working on new things. Meanwhile, we were quite lucky because the backend, they already started working on some microservices. So we used to have this Java monolith, and they already were working on breaking it apart. So for example, they already started to create a product service and a member service, which was really beneficial for us because the microservice landscape started to find its way. But it was still consumed by the Java monolith and not by the front-end application. So then we said, okay, probably someone read an article about microfrontends, like Kitson just explained, like, oh, we're missing out. We need to use this, but it worked out pretty well. But what is a microfrontend? So a microfrontend architecture is an approach to develop web applications as a composition of small front-end apps. So basically what you do, you build several small applications, which eventually will make up the complete website. Which was really beneficial for us because we wanted to rebuild the website step by step. And by doing this, we could start small. So you're not writing a monolith application anymore. So the application is broken down into domain-specific microfrontends. So then the question, of course, is what is the domain? So a domain is a logical group of features. So for example, you can have the account domain, and you can have several pages within the account domain. So you can have the register, login, just the my account page. Or you can have the products domain. You can have searching for products, just an overview of products, maybe a landing page, or you can have the product detail pages. So that's also one specific domain. And the good thing is you can place one team on a domain. So we said, okay, we're just going to try it and see how it works, and we're going to start small. So we started with account. And I don't know if people from the account team, there's some people from Albert Heijn here, but I don't know if anyone from the account team is here, because I still have a picture when you started working on the account application. So I think that was you. Like they were so proud, oh yeah, finally we can work with microfrontends. But what does it look like? Or what does our microfrontend architecture look like? Because there are a lot of, if you read articles about it, there are a lot of different ways of doing microfrontends, and it's just a word, but not, it doesn't say, okay, you need to implement it this way. So the way that we did it, we said, okay, basically one microfrontend is going to consist of 4 folders. So first of all, we have the web folder, and there we have a node server dedicated for server-side rendering. So we don't want to mix up our node server, which serves as an API, with the server-side rendering part, because the server-side rendering part can be quite intense, and you want maybe to scale that up individually from the API container. So we use Node and we use React, obviously, and we also use TypeScript, by the way. And that was the only limitation that we set. So for the rest, you can fill in the blanks as a team what you actually need within your application, because some people might want to use Redux, the other one wants to use GraphQL, and this offers the flexibility to do that. Then we have the API folder, so we just have a simple Node server, Express server, but you can rewrite it if you want to, but it just starts up a simple API server, which the web server consumes. So for testing, we choose Cypress. And the good thing now is that you only have to test your microfrontend. And you don't have to run end-to-end test on the entire application anymore. So instead of running an end-to-end test for 4 or 5 hours, it now probably runs in 30 minutes or maybe 20 minutes. Oh yeah, by the way, the Nginx folder. So every project also has an Nginx folder, and it's nothing more than a reverse proxy. So when you're testing locally, for example, then you have your microfrontend running, but you don't want to run all the other microfrontends. So then we just reroute you to the test environment to test it together with all the other microfrontends. And I'll show you that in a bit. So what does it look like in this architecture? So we have the backbone application, and this is one microfrontend within the architecture. So you just deploy your microfrontend next to it, and then if a user enters the website, and I'm going to give you the account example because we started with account, Then we already had an Apache gateway, and we check, is the URL /account? No, then we just redirect you still to the old solution. But is it /account? Then we're going to redirect you to the Kubernetes cluster. So I don't want to go too in depth about Kubernetes because that's a whole different talk. But basically, everyone can host their microfrontends there, and you can set up ingress rules, which are, for example, if you go to /account, you should go to my application. So in Kubernetes, we deploy our microfrontend. So we have the web and the API container there. And this offers a really flexible solution because now we can just add more rewrite rules to the Apache gateway once more microfrontends are added. So for example, we started with products, and then, okay, we also add products as an exception, and then we deploy products in the Kubernetes cluster. And this offers a really flexible way of migrating the website step by step. So same here, if you deploy products, then it's just another application that runs next to it. So there are some advantages when you do this. So first of all is ownership. So now there's one team dedicated to account, there's one team dedicated to products, and they feel entirely responsible for their application. Yeah, they can do everything with their application, and they also monitor the application and see if it performs well, and they can do everything within their team. You also end up with more domain knowledge. So believe it or not, products are really complex, and that's probably with every company, all domains require very specific knowledge to work with it. And if you just work on the product section or account section, you gain a lot of knowledge about that domain, and you become much more knowledgeable, and you also serves as innovation. Because if you have more knowledge about a specific domain, then you can also think of better solutions to do things. So deployments, which is another really beneficial thing about microfrontends, because now we can deploy products or account separately from the old solution. So if we have an update to products or account, we don't need to wait before the old solution goes live. We can just deploy it to the Kubernetes cluster, and then you have the new version live. Which also results in a faster time to market because you can basically deploy whenever you want to. And performance is another thing because you're building much smaller applications, and there are also some trade-offs here, which I'll mention later. But you can focus on just what you need within your domain to make it faster. So we did some other improvements. So we have dashboarding per team. And this is something that we started a year ago with, well, not the dashboarding, but we started working DevOps. And DevOps means is that you're responsible completely also for the deployment itself within the team. So if something goes down, then you actually get a phone call and then you need to fix it. And dashboarding is a great way of seeing where things might go wrong. And especially, for example, with an Albert Heijn or a big e-commerce platform, there are so many different use cases that you can never cover anything. So I always like to say that you can never cover anything within tests, and monitoring is so much more important than having end-to-end tests, because if you have good monitoring, then you can respond right away, make a new deployment, and fix it. And if you do have good end-to-end tests, then they might not even find it, and if you don't have the monitoring, then you will never find it. So I already found so much stuff in monitoring, and there are so many unique use cases. So how many of you use monitoring within your project? Yeah, it's about 30%. Another improvement that we made is shared NPM packages. So we have our own Artifactory, and we wanted to share more code between the different projects. So we have a lot of shared NPM packages. For example, we have something for advertisements, we have something for web components, some Cypress utilities that we reuse. Maybe, for example, how to log in, you could reuse that. And this creates more shareability between the different projects. And because we said, okay, we use React as a base, because you can also use microfrontends where one team is working with Angular and one with Vue and one with React, but then it becomes harder to share features among teams. So I think it's good to set a solid base. For example, choose React, and then you can build shareable modules. We also have a shared pipeline, so everyone uses the shared pipeline to deploy stuff, so that everyone does the same thing. And also, for example, when you get a phone call that something is broken and it's not your application, then you know where to look and how to solve it. So a little demo. Let's pray that my computer still works. Let me turn this up. Okay, so what we did is, let's assume the scenario that Al says, okay, we want to have this live in the next 3 months. Then we need to make it happen. And they could, for example, choose to get an external team to build that specific microfrontend for the feature that they want. So what we did, we took advantage of React because it's very composable to build a starter kit just specific for Albert Heijn, and it creates a microfrontend out of the box. So let's see, we could do, for example, start, and we could say React live. Nice. Oh, great. Sorry. So then it asks you, okay, what's the name of your application? So we say React live. And what's your application context? So the context is the URL, your base URL. Because every microfrontend works with a base URL, and for example, you can have /products, /account, and of course you can have multiple routes in there, but you need a base URL. So we say, okay, it's React live. Team notifications, so we send a lot of notifications specific to that team, to their channel. For example, when you make a new deployment or something goes down, then you get a notification. So we say, okay, team React live. Let's hope it doesn't exist, it don't get spammed. This is, yeah, it's correct. So, oh yeah, okay. Luckily I already did this, so I need to go on the proxy. Please SMS work. Yep. So I already did a pre-install of all the npm modules, luckily. And then the starter also allows you to run the project. So we can do start and start again. And then we can choose to run it with Node.js or with Nginx. So I'm going to run it with Node.js now. Just have to wait. So what it does now, it starts up the web folder, the API folder, and the Nginx folder, which is now run on Node.js. So now we have our Albert Heijn website running on localhost. And what it does, it processes me to the test environment. So this is actually not my application, but once I go to React Live, then I have my microfrontend running. And the good thing about it is that it's self-contained, so I can do anything I want within my microfrontend. So I'll show you how that works. I need to open my editor. So this is the starter package that it creates. So here we see that we have an API folder, we have an Nginx folder, a test folder, and also, for example, if we look in the web folder, then we can see that it already generated some routes. So I could go to the routes tsx, and here you see, for example, we have 2 routes, a client-side application and a server-side application, just served as an example. So when a team starts with an Albert Heijn, they could just run this starter package, and then they could just go for it and start right away. And then all the decisions later on, for example, what packages other than React they want to use, they can decide for themselves and just do the best thing specific for their application. Because sometimes you miss that within a corporate environment, that something is already set in stone and you want to have some flexibility within your own project. But also, for example, when I change the background to red, then you can see that the background changed to red, but if I go to the home page, then it still works as it should, because that is not part of my application, I'm just changing my application. And here we have, for example, a server-side example and client-side example. So that's For example, one of the use cases is how we use React in a modular way to compose a new project, and also because we have all the shared npm modules, you can also plug in those modules. For example, you want to use a product card, if you want to use a service to connect with the member service or product service, you can import it as well and then use that within your API folder. So another thing it starts up, so this is the web, but it also starts up an API folder, which you can see this also, sorry, I'll turn it up a bit. So you can see that it's hosted under React Live, and that's consisted of this folder, and this is just a simple node server which already handles some authentication for you so that you don't have to do that manually. And here you can just plug in your own routes from your Express server, and then it will just work. All right. So we're still facing some challenges, of course, and there's never a golden solution. So one of it is dependency management. For example, when we update an important module, then you can have the scenario when people didn't update the module in a while, so then they have a lot of breaking changes when they're, for example, 2 months behind on that specific module, for example, when there's a security fix somewhere. So dependency management is actually a challenge right now, and also making sure that everyone is always on the latest version. Breaking down the silos, because we work in groups now, so you have a separate domain within your team that you're working on. So it's not that necessary anymore to communicate with the other teams. So it's becoming a bigger challenge to break down the silos and communicate with other teams what they're working on, because they might build something that you could use. And also global changes. So every global change, every microfrontend needs to do a deployment. So for example, the header is included within the starter. And if there's a change in the header, then everyone needs to update that module and deploy. And bundle size. So you can imagine that because we don't say, okay, you have to use this Lodash version or this one, you can imagine that one team uses Lodash 1.2 and the other one 1.3, and then it's a shame because you have, when you switch microfrontends, you have to load them both. So what we're actually doing now, we're moving all the npm packages in a mono repo, and then we're saying, okay, we're using this Lodash version, and whether you use it or not within that npm module, we're using this moment.js, for example, and then you can choose, or then we can extract some of the bundle. For example, we say, okay, we're using React version 16 point something, and then we can put that in a different bundle that's reused by all the microfrontends. And one of the things we're looking into is a stitching layer, because now when you go to a different microfrontend, then you have a hard refresh and you need to load everything again. So a stitching layer is something that connects all the microfrontends, but it's a challenge. So if anyone has a good solution, please come to me, because search engine optimization, for example, it's going to be difficult because you're also going to do a lot of things client-side when you do a stitching layer. So that was it. Thank you.